Don't let them define you, child. I used to be just like you. His voice was low, gentle, and so real the wind seemed to stop blowing. Kweku Mensah, a tall, slender man in a pale ash hoodie, slowly knelt beside the little girl curled up at the edge of a park bench in Hampstead Heath. Late autumn leaves swirled around their feet, rustling like whispers from a season that had just fled. The girl looked down at her shoes. Torn, faded. The soles were almost detached from the canvas. She said nothing, only trembled slightly at the shoulders. A muffled sob blended with the wind. A group of school kids ran by, giggling. Guess the park's recycling trash today, a boy sneered, glancing at her shoes. Those sneakers look like they stink. The girl flinched, wrapping her arms around her stomach as if it were her last shield. She didn't respond, and Kweku felt his heart twist, that familiar ache he'd buried for years rising without warning. He hadn't planned to come to the park. He was running from tense meetings in Canary Wharf, silent glances at last night's charity gala, and the blinding quiet of the penthouse he lived in alone. But this girl, so small, so thin, and heartbreakingly familiar. "May I help you tie your laces?" Kweku offered, voice soft, hand extended as if asking permission, not imposing. The girl looked up, eyes swollen. Tears not yet dry, but those eyes, deep, sharp, older than her age. She nodded just that. He bent down, hands that once signed £100 million contracts now fumbling with a knotted lace. The left shoelace was nearly snapped. "I'm Kweku," he said softly. "What's your name?" "Lina," she mumbled, voice barely audible. "Mom says I should ignore mean kids. But sometimes, I wish I could disappear." That sentence was like a blade slicing through his armor. He froze, then looked straight into her eyes. Cold, honest, painful. "Lina," he whispered, "you don't need to disappear. The world must learn how to see you as you truly are." A gust of wind swept through, tossing Lina's old scarf into the air. Leaves spun like butterflies breaking formation. "What are you doing with my daughter?" The voice cut through the air like a knife. A woman, caramel-skinned, mid-30s, hair tightly tied up, stormed toward them like a tempest. Her handbag swung wildly, eyes wide with panic. She threw herself between Lina and Kweku, pulling her daughter into her arms with one hand and pushing Kweku's hand away with the other. "Stay away from her," she snapped. Kweku jolted and stepped back, both hands raised in surrender. He slowly stood, keeping his tone calm. "Ma'am, I mean no harm." She was crying. "Shut up," she cut him off. Her voice shook, but was sharp as steel. "I don't care who you are." "This." Lina looked on, wide-eyed, glancing back and forth between the two adults. One was a stranger speaking in silky tones. The other, her mother, was an impenetrable wall, breath ragged as if finishing a sprint. He meant to say something more, but then their eyes met. She froze. He held his breath. Her eyes widened, lips parting as if to speak half fury, half disbelief. Rage halted by recognition. "Kweku?" He could barely believe it. "Amina?" It couldn't be mistaken. That face, though now lined with weariness, was still Amina Diop. The art student who once made him believe the world had colors beyond Excel sheets, the woman who vanished from his life without a word. "You disappeared," he stammered. "No message, no number, no address. You had all the power, all the connections, but never did you try to find me." Her voice trembled, but cut like a blade. Lina tugged her mother's hand. "Mom, do you know him?" Amina turned away, hand covering her face, exhaling sharply. "Let's go, Lina." "Wait." Kweku took a step forward. "Amina, I didn't know about the girl, about you. You thought I vanished like smoke." She stared at him, eyes blazing. "Did you ever ask yourself why I didn't want to raise a child in your world? I wanted my daughter to know who she is, not what the media called her." Kweku's throat tightened. His fists clenched unconsciously. "The girl, is she mine?" Amina didn't answer. She only held Lina tighter. "Mom?" Lina asked again. "What's going on?" Silence settled like fog. Kweku knelt again, face level with Lina's, voice cracking. "Lina, If I'd known you were mine, I would have. He choked. I didn't know. But now I'm here. Amina pulled her daughter back. You can't just walk in like nothing ever happened. Kweku nodded slowly. I'm not asking for anything, except for a chance to make it right. The wind blew again. Leaves spun in the air. In the quiet between the three of them, Lina reached out, not out of certainty, but curiosity. She touched Kweku's sleeve lightly. You said you used to be like me? She asked softly. Kweku looked at her. More than you can imagine. He stepped back, letting Amina lead the girl away. But something had shifted. A door had opened, and it would not shut the way it used to. The wind howled through the soundproof glass of the 34th floor penthouse in Canary Wharf. London city lights stretched like electrical impulses, blinking, dazzling, and cold. Kweku Mensah sat motionless by the window, holding a cup of cold espresso. But he didn't drink. He stared. Not outward, but deep into himself. A fragment of memory from Hampstead Heath still weighed heavily in his chest like a stone. You used to be like me? Lina's question echoed endlessly. He had never imagined that a simple question from a child could shake the tower he had built around his heart. On the side table next to him lay a sealed white envelope. Embossed logo, Gensure UK, DNA Diagnostics. Inside was the test kit he'd requested rush delivery overnight under a false name. He opened it. His hands trembled slightly. A gentle swab inside the cheek. A seemingly simple motion, but for Kweku, it was a stab straight to the chest of a man who had lied to himself for too long, pretending he desired control and quiet. He placed the swab into the small vial, capped it, labeled it, Zender, KD, AU, Identifier, Kweku Delta. Recipient, Gensure Laboratory. 24. Our priority. No one could know. No media. No Amina. No Lina. No assistant. Not even Lina, his chief of staff, who knew every meeting, every weakness. His phone vibrated just as he was sealing the package. Lina calling. He hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. Kweku. Her voice was always professional but sharp. You declined 3 summit invitations in one evening. What's going on? Nothing. He lied. I just need time. You never need time. You schedule time to lose time. A pause. So the thing in the park, is it real? He closed his eyes. Exhaled slowly. Send me the private address for our internal courier unit. Tell them to be ready to pick up a parcel. No questions. No tracking. Understood. Lina paused. Are you okay? I don't know yet. His voice low. But I'm searching. He hung up. I handed the parcel to a special staff member at midnight in the underground parking lot of Mensah Tower. He opened the safe in his room, pulling out an old photo. A young woman in traditional Ghanaian dress with a red kente head wrap, smiling, one hand resting on her belly, not prominently, but pregnant. Amina. The photo was from their final year at university in Accra before they moved to the UK. He had never noticed the hand placement before. He chuckled not out of joy, but from realizing his blindness. A man like him who calculated every detail and signed £100 million deals with a look had missed an obvious sign. And now, the consequence was a 6-year-old girl with torn shoes and teary eyes who once wished she could disappear. He folded the photo and placed it back into the safe. This time, if the result came back positive, he wouldn't vanish like his father did. No running, no excuses. Just presence even if he was rejected, hated, or deemed too late. Because if he didn't stand up for that little girl, then who would? The next morning, Kweku didn't go to the office. He canceled all meetings, citing health reasons. All day, he sat by the window, watching the people below. Office workers, school kids with red backpacks, a couple arguing at the cafe on the corner. Each person has a story. But for Lina, her story was being written for her. Written by scornful eyes. By mocking laughter from children who inherited prejudice from adults. And he had once been one of those adults, unaware, indifferent. No more. As night fell, he opened his notebook, a worn, soft, leather-bound one, and began to write. Lina, if you are mine, I owe you a beginning. I can't return 5 years of silence, but I can offer you the rest of my life. If you'll allow it. He paused, wrote nothing more. Tomorrow, the results would arrive, and his life, once defined by numbers, achievements, and solitude, would enter a new chapter. No longer certain, no longer safe, but real. For the first time, the phone screen lit up just as dawn cast a pale golden glow across the glass towers of Canary Wharf. The subject line appeared, DNA result. Password protected. Kweku sat motionless on the sofa, shirt half-buttoned, cold coffee in hand. He had thought he was ready. But as his finger touched the screen, his heart pounded wildly like the first time he heard his name announced at the honorary graduation ceremony at Cambridge. Only this time, it wasn't about glory. It was something more profound truth. He entered the password. The result page appeared. Genetic match. 99.997%. Probability of paternity. Very high. Kweku sank into the chair, both hands covering his head. Not because of the statistics, but because something cracked open inside. A layer he had built with logic, success, solitude, and cowardice. From this moment on, there was no turning back. Lina was his daughter, undeniably, and retreat was no longer an option. He changed shirts, got in his car, and drove to East Finchley where Amina lived. He didn't call ahead, because he knew if he did, Amina would lock the door. She wasn't ready to forgive. But he couldn't wait another 6 years to knock on the door of his daughter's life. It was Lina who opened the door. She wore a yellow dress, her hair tied to the side, and she was holding a copy of Noughts and Crosses by Mallory Blackman. You. She froze. I didn't think you'd come. Dad, he said softly. If you'll let me, then it's Dad. She hesitated. Her eyes were like a fledgling bird's wanting to fly but afraid. Then she opened the door wider, stepping aside to let him in. Amina wasn't home. The small living room was full of sunlight and color, from hand-drawn paintings to a plastic vase in the corner. Kweku sat down on the sofa. No marble boardroom tables. No assistant by his side. Just him, a father, relearning how to be present. I realized it at the park, Lina said quietly. But I was afraid to ask. Because if it were true, and you disappeared, it would hurt more. You have every right to be afraid, Kweku replied. And every right to say no. But I'm here, not to apologize in words, but to stay through actions. She looked at him for a long, long time. Then, she gently pulled a small piece of paper from her book, a sketch. A man in a hoodie is bending down to tie the shoelaces of a curly-haired girl. I drew this, she whispered. That night, he couldn't hold back his tears. For the first time, he cried for something that wasn't in his plans. Lina stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder hesitantly, then firmer. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling his head to rest on her shoulder, small but solid, as if that spot had always been home. No one said anything else. Outside, the church bell rang through the street, a familiar tune from the neighbor's radio. Fix You, Coldplay. Kweku held the little girl in his arms as if cradling his salvation. And in that moment, what he once thought were losses and ruins suddenly became the reason to begin again. Lina, would you like to accompany Dad to the company today? Kweku bent down to tie his daughter's new sneakers, white with pink trims, not yet smudged. The little girl looked up at him, her eyes a mix of curiosity and skepticism. You work at that place everyone calls the Metal Tower, right? Lina asked. I heard Mom say, people there wear suits, drink black coffee, and don't smile. Kweku laughed. That's partly true. But today, I need you there to bring some color. No. Lina put on her red backpack, hugging her comic book. The black taxi rolled them from East Finchley toward London's financial district, where the glass buildings shimmered like blades, reflecting sunlight coldly. Mensah Capitol Tower loomed ahead. 2 security guards bowed slightly. Lina, the chief of staff, was already in the lobby, one hand holding an iPad, and the other was ready with the Q3 report. But she paused when she saw the little girl next to the CEO. Good morning, sir. And, hello there. Lina smiled, hiding her surprise. And who might you be? I'm his daughter, Lina said without hesitation. And today, I'm attending meetings. Kweku nodded slightly. No explanation. No concealment. Only a look that said, this is my daughter. The VIP elevator took them to the 37th floor, the CEO's office. The doors revealed a room like an art gallery. Transparent glass walls, ebony wood flooring, bookshelves arranged geometrically, and a large abstract painting behind the desk. Lina stepped in, quietly looking around. "Dad, you're here every day?" she asked. "Yes, alone. Isn't it sad?" Kweku didn't answer. He walked to the corner of the room, where a secondary chair lower, ash gray, had been brought in from a smaller meeting room. He placed it next to his desk, then turned and said, "I had this chair brought in last night, because I thought, if one day you wanted to, it could be where you sit when you run this place. But you don't have to just because you're my daughter. You do it if you want to. If you dream big." Lina sat in the chair. It was a bit high for her. Her feet dangled, but she sat upright, hands on the desk, eyes gazing out the window like a true leader. "Dad, if someone asks why I'm here, just tell them, because you have the right." He smiled, walked over to a glass cabinet, and took out a new photo frame. A picture from the park the other day of Lina sitting beside him, smiling at each other. The photo had been enlarged, framed in dark mahogany. He placed it on the desk, next to a small potted plant. "Lina, you know something?" he said slowly. "I used to think this office was my greatest achievement, but really, it was a cage. And you, with just one hug, opened the door." Lina didn't answer. She stepped down from the chair and walked over to her dad. "Dad." She hesitated. "What if? I don't want to be a CEO." He bent down and took her hand. "Then I'll still keep that chair for you. Whatever you become, an artist, a writer, an engineer, or a storyteller, that seat is still yours. Because you have the right to sit in any room without asking permission." Lina looked around once more. Dad's office isn't as cold as Mom said. It's only cold when no one's in it. And that afternoon, on the 37th floor of a financial empire, the richest African man in London didn't sign a single contract. He sat beside his daughter, doodling on paper, a house, a rainbow, and a cat wearing a crown. No one else needed to witness it, because in that moment, a little chair had become the symbol of an entirely new legacy. 2 weeks had passed since Lina stepped into the 37th floor office of Mensah Capital. Everything seemed quiet until a leaked email popped up on the screen of an ITV News London morning reporter. Subject: Top black CEO in the UK acknowledges illegitimate daughter. Source: anonymous and internal PR team member at Mensah Capital. Attachment: a blurry photo from a hallway security camera, Lina walking with Kweku, holding her red school bag, beaming. The photo spread across Twitter, Reddit, and London's parent Facebook groups in less than an hour like an unstoppable wave. A brown-skinned girl in a multi-million-pound tower. Scandal or human redemption? Who's the mother? Why now? The morality of the leadership class? The debate erupted not just about Kweku, but the entire black elite in the UK. Being twice as perfect was the entry ticket to recognition, but even the tiniest crack brought triple the scrutiny. In East Finchley, Amina stood frozen in front of the television. The morning news replayed the image of Lina smiling, a smile she hadn't seen shine that brightly since Lina's 4th birthday. The reporter said, "In a world where CEOs often hide their flaws behind glass walls and polished PR, the public appearance of young Lina at the Mensah Capital headquarters raises a question. Can a leader be a father, a symbol, and a human being without giving something up?" Amina gripped the remote tightly. Her eyes didn't leave the screen, her heart torn between fury because Kweku hadn't asked before introducing Lina to the world, and a quiet, unnameable relief at seeing their daughter finally acknowledged. At that exact moment, inside the main company office, Lina pushed open the door, her eyes flashing with urgency. "Immediate response needed. Press is calling. The board wants a statement. Legal says stay silent until things stabilize." Kweku raised his hand. "I know what to do." He stepped out onto the balcony of his office where the light was best and recorded a 1-minute video uploaded directly to his official account. He spoke without a script, without edits, without deflection. "I'm Kweku Mensah. And yes, the girl in the photo is my daughter, Lina. I wasn't there for the first 6 years of her life. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know. Now I do. And I'm not going away." If my daughter's presence in the office makes you question professionalism, then remember this. This office once lacked the most precious thing, a real human being. The video spread like wildfire. In 3 hours, over 3 million views, more than 10,000 comments. The reactions split into two camps. Attackers, calling him a hypocrite, using a child to salvage his image. Supporters, praising his transparency, courage, and rare sincerity in the cold world of finance. Lina read each comment silently, clutching the framed photo of her and her father from her tiny desk. She didn't fully understand the grown-up's words, but she knew clearly. She was no longer a secret. And truth, though it shook the media world, was a door now open. Not toward the spotlight, but toward the heart. That evening, Amina called Kweku. For the first time in years, they spoke not to argue, but because of their daughter. You didn't ask me. You put her in front of the wolves. No, not wolves, he replied, but a world that needs to learn she's not something to hide. You taught me that by disappearing. A silence. Tomorrow, I'll take her to school. And you, let her live like a child. I promise. And for the first time, he understood that a true promise isn't found in speeches, but in knowing when silence speaks louder. Monday, 8 a.m. An urgent email marked High Priority appeared on Lina's screen. Subject, Exceptional Meeting, Men's at H Capital Board of Directors. The content was brief and cold. In light of the recent media backlash and its impact on the company's reputation, the board requests Mr. Kweku Mensah to be present in the executive meeting room, 38th floor, at 14 o'clock to clarify personal conduct affecting the corporate image. No mention of the word father, no daughter, no Lina, only personal conduct. Lina printed the notice and tapped gently on the CEO's office door. Kweku was making tea, a rare habit he picked up from his mother, pouring hot water over fresh mint leaves. No sugar, no milk. He didn't look up as Lina entered. You've heard? She asked. Yes, he handed her the second cup. They think they can shrink me down, box me into a moral frame they built from artificial cleanliness. Lina sat down. Are you prepared? I don't need to prepare for the truth. 2 p.m. The boardroom on the 38th floor, where 12 men and 1 woman sat in a U-shaped formation. At the front, a large LED screen displayed the company's stock price, slightly dipping. Kweku entered. No entourage, no laptop, no legal advisor, only a rolled-up drawing, Lina's drawing in his hand. The board chairman, Mr. Douglas Marston White, classically British, Oxford-accented, spoke first. Mr. Mensah, are you aware that your recent personal actions directly impacted this quarter's dividends and created division among international investors? Kweku unrolled the drawing, spreading it out across the table. The room went silent. In the picture, Lina had drawn 2 people sitting together, one with square glasses, brown skin, holding a signature pen, the other smaller, smiling, drawing a heart. This is the only thing I brought today, he said, because I traded too much to reach this position, so much that I forgot I was once a child who simply wanted to be seen. Mr. Marston cleared his throat. Personalizing the company is not part of our strategic framework, Mr. Mensah, which is precisely why this company has never had a heart, Kweku replied, locking eyes with each of them. We can issue shares but not trust. A woman on the board, Mrs. Priya Khurana, representing Indian stakeholders, spoke up. So, are you planning to turn Mensah Capital into a family reality show? Or an emotional internship center? Kweku walked over to the screen and changed the slide. Now showing a photo of Lina in the small CEO office, reading a book on equal rights. Underneath was the caption he had posted the previous week. A company cannot grow if the founder's heart stays small. No one spoke. No one laughed. But something cracked or shattered within the seemingly unshakable structure of men in suits who never unbutton their emotions. At the end of the meeting, Mr. Marston said, "We will hold an internal vote to determine whether you will continue representing the company in public." Kweku nodded and rolled up the drawing again. I don't need to be chosen to show up. I need to be real. As he left the room, his eyes passed over the empty chair at the end of the table. An honorary guest member seat is usually reserved for high-tier investors or potential successor CEOs. Today, it sat empty. He looked at it, then smiled quietly. Soon, Lina, that chair will bear your name. and they'll have no choice but to call you by 2 words. The successor. On the small whiteboard in Lina's bedroom, surrounded by stickers of cats and princess crowns, a freshly taped 2-plies of 4 sheets stood out. In neat black marker handwriting, final essay topic, year tray. If you could change one thing in society, what would it be? Lina picked up her pen. Her head rested lightly on her pillow, brows furrowed as if she were contemplating a giant strategy. She had once thought of writing about having more playgrounds, or a law that made selling ice cream mandatory every summer. But then she remembered the thing that made her mother cry. The thing that caused whispers around the school after the news broadcast aired. And she wrote, "I would change how people look at people with brown skin." She wrote in a flow, without stopping, without erasing, as if her small heart were speaking out each line. "I don't know why skin color makes people look at you differently. My dad says I'm beautiful, smart, and allowed to dream big. But the other day, Mum's friend said my dad was only forgiven because he's rich. What if he wasn't a CEO? He'd still be my dad, and I'd still matter. I want one day when I grow up for people not to ask, 'Are you mixed?' or 'Do you only live with your mum?' but instead to ask, 'What do you dream about?' Because my dreams don't depend on my skin color, who my parents are, or whether I go to a public or private school. I want every child to be loved without proving they're worth it. So I'm writing this letter to the Minister of Education, because I think, if schools teach that everyone is equal, then maybe grown-ups will remember it more often." She signed, Kweku Mensah, 8 years old, London. Brown skin. And I have rights. Amina read the letter, speechless. She sat down on the bed and pulled Lina into her arms. "Do you want to send it? They might not even read it." Lina nodded. "But at least they'll see my name. And no, I'm not invisible." Amina stayed quiet for a moment. Then she opened her laptop. She posted the letter on social media. She had only a few hundred friends on Facebook, but one of them was a cousin who worked at the Ministry of Culture. And sometimes, the simplest things travel the farthest. In less than 24 hours, the post hit over 200,000 shares. On Twitter, the hashtag Dear Minister from Lina climbed to the top 5 trending topics in the UK. Journalists began calling her Little Justice. The Office of the Education Minister, Mrs. Eleanor Whitby, issued an official statement. "We have read the letter from Miss Kweku Mensah. The minister's office will host a formal meeting with primary school student representatives in the next 2 weeks to discuss fairness and diversity in education. We have sent an official invitation to Lina and her family." Kweku read the invitation silently. A shiver ran down his spine, not from fame, but from the realization that his daughter, just 8 years old, had stepped into the world not with fear, but with a clear voice. He posted on LinkedIn, "I used to think I had to pave the road for my daughter, but maybe she's clearing the path for me, and for a new generation." That very same day, a handwritten letter was delivered to Lina's primary school. From the head teacher. Its message was simple. "Starting today, we are adding 3 new books by authors of color to our library. And we are pinning Lina's letter on the main school bulletin board, because no child should have to prove they deserve to exist." The grand conference room of the UK Department for Education, usually the site of budget policies and school inspection briefings, felt unusually different today. On the front row bench, beside gray-suited educational advisors with thick files in hand, sat an 8-year-old girl. Her hair was neatly braided. She wore a pale yellow dress, her feet swinging slightly above the floor, and a folded piece of paper in her hand. Kweku Mensah, the girl who had written the letter that shook the nation. Her mother, Amina, sat to her right in a cream-colored long dress, her eyes a mix of pride and tension. To her left was an empty seat. Kweku couldn't be there, but on the small table in front of Lina was a framed photo, her and her father, sitting by the window on the 37th floor where she had once said, "Daddy, this room feels cold when no one's in it." Minister Eleanor Whitby stepped up to the podium, her voice formal yet softened. "Today we are not hearing from experts, but from someone living the outcome of every policy we make. A young citizen who has something to say to us." She nodded toward Lina. A polite wave of applause followed. The cameras rolled. Every lens pointed at the little girl. Lina stood. Her paper trembled slightly in her hand, but her eyes did not blink. "My name is Kweku Mensah. I wrote to the minister because I think, if a child knows what's right, then grown-ups should too. I used to think my brown skin was a small thing, Until I saw how grown-ups looked at my dad differently because of it. They didn't say it out loud, but they asked if my mum was the nanny. They asked who I lived with. They asked why I didn't look like the daughter of a CEO. I'm just a kid. But I know that's not fair. The room fell still. She continued, her voice steadier. I don't want my friends to explain their family background just to be treated commonly. I don't want teachers to assume a brown kid can't lead a group. And I don't want all the main characters in library books to be white. I hope schools can have classes about feelings, so we all learn that everyone hurts. And I hope every child gets asked, "What's your dream?" instead of, "Do you have a dad?" She folded her paper and placed her hand over her heart. My name is Lina. I have a dad. I have the right to dream. And if you're not used to hearing that, then today's a good day to start. The room erupted in applause this time, not polite. It was loud, unrestrained. Minister Whitby stepped down from her seat and reached out to shake Lina's hand. But the little girl instead walked up to the podium, by herself. Oh, and one last thing, she added. If I'm still called a special case after today, then that means not enough children have been heard. Another round of applause, louder, longer, unstoppable. That evening, the hearing was broadcast nationwide, on television, across social media, on evening news specials. The hashtag Lina Speaks hit one on Twitter UK. On the BBC, veteran journalist Sarah Mahmood said, "We are witnessing the birth of a new icon of justice. Not in a courtroom, but in a classroom. Not through a degree, but through a handwritten letter and a steady hand." At home, Kweku stood in front of the television, his hand pressed over his heart as he watched his daughter, no longer needing anyone to speak for her. He wept, not from pride, but because, for the first time, he felt forgiven. The week following the hearing, the world shifted slightly. In Geneva, a task force from the World Economic Forum held an emergency meeting. On the large LED screen was a clip of Lina's speech at the UK Department for Education, her eyes bright, her voice small but firm. A caption ran beneath, "Daughter of Kweku Mensah, CEO of Mensah Capital. Recently declined nomination to chair the European Business Forum." No one understood the reason for the rejection, until an old advisor said softly, "Perhaps he chose to be a father instead." In London, the 37th floor office had become quieter. Kweku arrived on time, but no longer 2 hours before anyone else. He still signed contracts and spoke with investors. But now, after 5 p.m., his phone switched off. Meetings were never scheduled during Lina's school pickup time. Then one weekend afternoon, while father and daughter were folding paper planes in the living room, the landline rang. A woman's voice came through with a light French accent. "Monsieur Mensah, I'm a special envoy from the Davos Executive Board. We invite you and your daughter, Lina, to speak at the opening session on the future of social justice and children's education. We believe a child's voice can reshape even the coldest boardrooms." Kweku went silent. He looked at Lina, head bowed, hair falling gently across her cheek, lips murmuring, "Left, right, fold this corner," as if the world had never demanded she grow up too fast. He turned back to the phone. "Thank you for the invitation, but I think the world doesn't need another speech from me." The representative hesitated. "What about young Lina? Would she want to?" Kweku handed her the receiver. "Sweetheart, someone from Switzerland wants to know if you'd like to tell your story." Then, Lina pressed the phone to her ear, squinting. "Do I have to wear a suit?" The voice chuckled. "Number. You can wear a princess dress if you'd like." "Okay then, I agree. But I don't want to speak alone. My mum has to come. And my dad too. Otherwise, no. Thank you." 3 days later, headlines filled the media. Lina Mensah, 8, the girl whose letter moved a nation, to become youngest ever speaker at the Davos Forum. Ensicht. Meanwhile, on her blog, Amina, for the first time in years, wrote a short post. "I used to think I was a strong single mother. Turns out, I'm someone who's been taught courage by her child. And the man I once resented, today, he chose to sit down, learn how to be a father, rather than stand atop the podium of glory and forget who's waiting at home." At the edge of her desk, Lina pinned a small note. "Davos. I will say, I used to be called special just because I had a dad, but then I realized I'd always been special, and so are many others." Kweku read the note. He kissed his daughter's forehead. "Tomorrow, When you speak at Davos, remember, I don't need the whole world to listen. I need you to believe in what you say. Ak. The main hall at Davos, Switzerland, where once rang the voices of UN Secretaries General of Greta Thunberg, and where the world's largest corporations made billion-dollar pledges, today opened with a voice no one expected. Young, brown-skinned, and just 8 years old. Lina stepped onto the stage amid a forest of black suits, corporate dresses, and television cameras. She wore a pink dress, white sneakers, and a crown-shaped hair clip. She did not tremble. Amina held Kweku's hand off stage, his breath shallow, as if his very heart stood on that stage. Lina didn't need a script. She looked straight at the audience, the most powerful people on earth. My name is Kweku Mensah. I'm 8 years old. I'm here because people say Davos is where grown-ups come to figure out how to change the world. But I think, if you want to change the world, you should ask, what do children see? The room went silent. My friend has to explain why her dad doesn't live with her. I see my mom being asked by a bank clerk if she speaks English. I see my dad, who built a whole company, being searched harder by security guards just because he has brown skin. But I also see a classmate standing up during recess and saying, Lina is better than me, so she should be the team leader. I see my teacher printing more books with African characters. I see my dad remembering to pick me up from school now. A small chuckle rippled through the room, then scattered applause. I don't know how big companies work, but I know that if I were the boss, I would ask, who is being left out? Who isn't being heard? Who is innovative but not trusted? And I'd start with the question, what do you dream about? Not, where are you from? Lina bowed, and the entire hall rose to its feet, a standing ovation. Ministers, CEOs, billionaires, global journalists all stood, not because a child spoke well, but because she spoke what they had forgotten. The world is meant to be lived together, not managed over one another. That night, the press called her the voice of tomorrow. On the way to the airport, back to London in the car, Lina fell asleep on her mother's shoulder. Kweku held Amina's hand, no longer awkward. He whispered, I used to think success meant sitting at the top of a pyramid, but now I know success is having your daughter trust you. Amina smiled, said nothing, but in her eyes forgiveness had begun to bloom. That evening, back in their small apartment, Lina dug into her backpack and handed her father a folded school paper. End-of-term essay, if I could change one thing in society. At the bottom, a perfect score of 10, and a note from the teacher. Lina, you didn't just write a wish. You're making it come true. That. Kweku pinned the paper to the refrigerator next to the photo of Lina beaming and the drawing titled, Daddy Tying My Shoelace. Then, in his handwriting, he added a line, from CEO to father, from mistake to hope, and from a child to the light that leads us forward.